So in this crazy and fast-paced world, it's not a surprise that pornography is something that is really big. 50% or more of Google searches go towards porn. That's a common statistic. Probably even more now than when I read that a few years ago. In this video, we're going to be looking at some signs, symptoms of pornography, and have a discussion on why it's a little harder to actually talk about this, and it's the thing that people just are not really discussing. Okay, I'm going to open up and say if you're struggling with porn and you're really questioning if you're an addict or not, I just want you to know you're not alone. There's definitely tons of resources. I'm a CSAT therapist, certified sex addiction therapist. I work with tons of people on pornography addiction and sexual addiction. I think the biggest thing here to say is you need to get plugged in. There's 12-step groups, there's other kinds of support groups, there's therapy. I think that getting plugged in and not being alone is really the first step that you should be making. If you're with a therapist, awesome. But if not, then I think that getting plugged in is the best way to go. Okay, interesting statistic. 90% of men and about 60% of women at some point will look at porn in their lives. And no, that's not a, quote, addiction level, but it just shows you how common this actually is in our society. So with that being said, how do you know if you're addicted to pornography? Here's some signs and symptoms that you may need to consider. 1, you use pornography as a way to cope and deal with your negative emotions. 2, you feel guilty and ashamed that you use pornography, and that guilt and shame cycle really comes in and just really eats you up. 3, you feel out of control and you've really tried to get a grasp on this for some time, but you just keep coming back to it over and over and over again. And the last one that I'll mention, because there's more, but the pornography use has affected your relationships and you still continue to use it even though you've probably had some failed relationships or there's some issues going on right now. Okay, so what do you do with this, right? What's the first step other than going to therapy? I already mentioned the first one. Recognize the signs. If you resonate with any of that earlier that I just said, I think it's time to just recognize the signs and really just get a grasp on where you are. Where do you stand? How much are you looking at? Is it an unhealthy level? And if your goal is to not look at any, but you're still looking at it, look at that as a consideration as well. The other thing is, like I said earlier, build a support system. You need to have support. You need to be supported through this process. And if therapy is that first step for you, great. Other things are really important as well. Get in a support group. Get connected with people that are also trying to really work on this stuff. Going and hang out with your buddies that may still be looking at porn, and if you want to stop looking at it, might not be the best option. The last thing I'll mention is self-care. Self-care is really important, and I think if you're not taking it, that's pretty much an indicator that your life could be out of control in a sort of, even in some other areas that aren't even related to porn. But everything links together, so if your life is out of control in some areas, then it may be out of control with porn use. All right, so if you're relating to some of this stuff and you're just like, oh my gosh, I may have a porn addiction, I want to tell you some things. So remember, don't be ashamed. Shame is one of those things that are going to keep you in that cycle over and over again, and it's just not helpful. And that's a whole process of working through your shame and grief cycles and really understanding what addiction actually is. But if you're ashamed, it's going to just really take root and it's going to keep you stuck in the same place. Okay, so the second thing to remember is set small goals. Take it one day at a time. It doesn't have to be overly complicated, and if you just focus on today, you can make it through the day. If you focus on the mountain, you're not going to be able to make it up the mountain. You could, but I don't know. Really easier to take one day at a time. Okay, so that leads me to the next point. Set some realistic goals. Your goals have to really just make sense, and if you're expecting to make significant progress in the matter of a week, that may not turn out well in the end of the day. Small goals every day. That has to happen. Lastly, the thing I'll mention is it's important to really celebrate the wins. And I know that seems counterintuitive because if you're struggling with this stuff, especially if you're having relationship issues, then it might seem a little bit difficult. But I think it is important to celebrate the wins, the small victories. If you make it 3 days and that's something that you've not really done, it's not that you're giving yourself a pat on the back necessarily, but you do have to recognize that and give yourself a little bit of credit because you have to look at the positives, even if they're this big. Okay, so closing up, there's no way that I can get to all of the things and really just hone in on everyone's specific issues related to porn addiction, but I want to tell you that this is some of the basic stuff that you can do to really start to navigate this process. I do encourage therapy. I think it's a great thing. And honestly, I think that you just need to start somewhere and just make some solid progress. Okay, so in conclusion, I just want you to remember this one thing. If you're struggling with this and you really are just really trying to just get help and you're maybe not even talking to anybody yet, just know that you're not alone. Support is really important, and starting somewhere is also important. So you have to start and just go day by day. I encourage you, take that step, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other, and just make it happen. If this content resonates with you, please click the subscribe button. I'm a therapist in Louisiana and Texas, and I work with specifically porn and sex addiction issues, and would love to be sharing some more topics related to this. So click that subscribe button right now. Go click it. Click, click, click. If you don't subscribe, it's totally okay. I love doing these videos and I just want to help people. So at the end of the day, that's what it's about. So see you on the next one.